My name is Debra, and I'm 34 years old. Last Christmas Eve, I stood in my childhood home holding a tray of homemade tiramisu while my family laughed at me. My sister Jennifer knocked the plate right out of my hands, sending it crashing to the floor. My mother looked at me with that familiar disappointment and said, "You'll never amount to anything just like your father." I stayed silent, watching them laugh in the house my grandfather had left behind. Before I continue this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from this holiday season. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. Trust me, what happened next will show you that sometimes the sweetest revenge is served with dessert. 6 months before that Christmas Eve, I was working as a waitress at a small Italian restaurant downtown. The lunch rush had just ended when a man in an expensive suit walked in, not to eat, but to find me. He introduced himself as Robert Harrison, an estate attorney, and said he had been looking for me for weeks. My grandfather Walter had passed away 3 months earlier, and I assumed everything had been settled. The family had already held the funeral, divided what they thought were his belongings, and moved on with their lives. But Mr. Harrison sat across from me in that empty restaurant and changed everything. "Your grandfather left a separate will," he said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. "One that nobody else knows about." My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was documentation that made my heart stop. Grandpa Walter had left me his house, the beautiful 2-story colonial, where I had spent every summer as a child, and $500,000 in savings he had carefully hidden from everyone. The conditions were unusual, though. I had to keep everything secret for 6 months. During that time, I was to observe my family document their behavior and see what Mr. Harrison called their true nature without the mask of inheritance hopes. Grandpa had been specific in his instructions. He wanted me to understand why he made this choice. You see, Grandpa Walter wasn't just my grandfather. He was my best friend. When he was diagnosed with lung cancer 2 years ago, I was the only one who moved back to town to care for him. I took unpaid leave from my job in Portland, spent my savings on gas and groceries, and slept on his couch for 18 months. I held his hand through chemotherapy cleaned up when he was too weak to make it to the bathroom, and read him the same war novels over and over because they brought him comfort. Where was my mother Linda during this time? She lived 20 minutes away, but only visited when she needed money. She would sweep in, complain about the smell of medicine, and ask about his bank accounts. My older sister Jennifer came exactly twice, both times with her husband Brad, and they spent the visits taking photos of furniture and artwork, discussing what they would sell first. My younger brother Kevin showed up once drunk, asking for a loan to start another one of his business ventures. Grandpa saw it all. Even through the fog of pain medication, he noticed who actually cared. He would squeeze my hand and whisper, "You're the only real family I have left, Debbie. The others are just vultures waiting for the feast." I always told him not to say such things, that family was family, but he would just shake his head. Mr. Harrison explained that Grandpa had been planning this for over a year. He had transferred the deed to a trust, moved his savings to a separate account, and created an ironclad will that couldn't be contested. But he wanted me to see what would happen when they thought they had won. He wanted me to understand that blood doesn't automatically make someone family. The lawyer handed me another document. This was a letter Grandpa had written just for me. In it, he explained that the house had been in our family for 80 years, built by his own father. It was meant to stay with someone who understood its value beyond money. He wrote about the memories we had created there, the summer afternoons, teaching me to play chess on the porch, the Thanksgiving dinners where I helped him cook while everyone else watched football. He remembered every birthday card I had sent him, every phone call just to check in every time I chose to spend my vacation days with him instead of going to the beach with friends. The letter ended with these words: "Sometimes you need to see people without their masks to understand who they really are. The next 6 months will be hard, my dear Debbie, but you need to see it. You need to understand why I'm giving you not just my house and money, but freedom from the obligation to people who don't deserve your love. Watch them carefully. Document everything. And when the time comes, you'll know what to do." The day after Grandpa's funeral, my family descended on his house like locusts. I stood in the corner of the living room, invisible as always, while they argued over who had the right to live there. My mother Linda declared that as the eldest child, she had automatic inheritance rights. Never mind that Grandpa had specifically told her years ago that she would get nothing if she didn't start treating people better. She had laughed in his face, then telling him he would never cut off his only daughter. Within a week, Linda had moved herself into the master bedroom. She brought all her gaudy furniture, replacing Grandpa's simple, elegant pieces with leopard print chairs and glass tables. She threw away his reading chair, the one where he spent countless hours with his books, because it didn't match her aesthetic. I watched from the doorway as she tossed his bookmarks in the trash, saying, "Finally, I can make this place look like something other than an old man's cave." Jennifer and Brad moved into the upstairs guest rooms the following week. Brad had lost another job this time for stealing from the register at the hardware store, though he claimed it was a misunderstanding. Jennifer supported him, of course, saying the world just didn't understand his genius. They immediately started making changes, painting over the beautiful wood paneling in the hallway, with stark white paint, removing the vintage light fixtures to sell online. Kevin took over the garage and basement, turning them into what he called his business headquarters. His business was selling questionable supplements online, the kind that promised to cure everything from baldness to cancer. The FDA had already sent him 2 warning letters, but he ignored them. He stored boxes of pills and powders where Grandpa used to keep his woodworking tools, the ones he had taught me to use when I was 12. Meanwhile, I stayed in my cramped studio apartment across town, the one with the leaking ceiling and the radiator that clanged all night. I visited the house like a guest, knocking on the door of what was secretly my own property. Each time they made me wait on the porch sometimes for 10 or 15 minutes before letting me in. Linda would look me up and down and say things like, "Still wearing clothes from the thrift store, I see. Maybe if you had any ambition, you could afford something decent." They treated the house like a free hotel. Jennifer hosted parties every weekend, inviting her shallow friends to drink expensive wine in the living room, where Grandpa and I used to work on puzzles. They would laugh about how Jennifer had finally made it inheriting such a beautiful house. No one corrected them to say it wasn't official yet, that no will had actually been read. They just assumed, and Jennifer let them believe it. The destruction of Grandpa's memory was what hurt the most. Jennifer found his purple heart from Korea in a drawer and listed it on eBay. When I protested, she rolled her eyes and said, "He's dead, Debra. He doesn't need it anymore." Brad discovered Grandpa's collection of first edition books, the ones he had spent decades collecting, and sold them to a dealer for quick cash to pay off his gambling debts. Kevin broke through the wall in the basement to create what he called a man cave, destroying the workshop where Grandpa had built furniture for charity. I documented everything just as the lawyer had instructed. I took photos of the damage-recorded videos of their conversations. When they didn't know I was listening, saved screenshots of Jennifer's social media posts bragging about her inheritance. She posted pictures of herself in the master bedroom with captions like, "Finally living the life I deserve," and "Moving up in the world, no more struggling." The worst was Thanksgiving. They hosted a huge dinner and invited all their friends, but not me. I found out through Facebook, where Jennifer posted photos of the full table with the caption, "Family complete without the disappointment." There I was alone in my apartment eating a turkey sandwich while looking at pictures of my family celebrating in what was actually my house. Linda had even used Grandma's china, the set she had specifically promised me before she died. That night I cried myself to sleep, wondering if Grandpa had been wrong to do this to me. The pain of watching them enjoy what they thought was theirs while treating me like garbage was almost unbearable. But then I remembered his words about seeing people without their masks. He was right. They were showing me exactly who they were, people who would step on anyone, even family, to get what they wanted. The next morning, Mr. Harrison called to check in. He reminded me that this was all temporary, that justice would come. He had been keeping track of everything too, building a legal case that would be ironclad. He informed me that Jennifer had been using the house's address to apply for credit cards fraudulently, that Kevin was violating zoning laws with his business operations, and that none of them had paid a cent toward the property taxes, assuming it was handled by the estate. December arrived with snow and expectations. The family started planning a massive Christmas Eve party, sending out fancy invitations to show off their inherited home. Linda bought a 12-foot Christmas tree, charging it to a credit card she thought was connected to Grandpa's estate. They hired caterers, a bartender, and even a small string quartet. The invitation list included everyone they wanted to impress, from Linda's book club to Brad's former bosses. People they wanted to show that they had finally made it. My invitation came as an afterthought. A text from Jennifer saying, "You can come and help serve if you want. We'll pay you $50. It was exactly what I expected from them and exactly what I needed for my plan. December 20th arrived with a fresh snowfall and a sense of anticipation I had been nurturing for weeks. I met with Mr. Harrison at his office, where we finalized all the paperwork. The eviction notices were perfectly legal, giving them 72 hours to vacate starting December 26th. We had documented enough lease violations and illegal activities to make it impossible for them to fight. The ownership papers were transferred fully to my name backdate, to the day Grandpa died, making me the legal owner for the entire time they had been living there. I also discovered more about their activities through the private investigator Mr. Harrison had hired. Jennifer had been running a credit card scam using the house as collateral for loans she never intended to pay back. She had already racked up $40,000 in debt under the house's address. Kevin's supplement business was under federal investigation, and he had been storing illegal substances in the garage. Brad had been worse than we thought. He had actually promised the house to a bookie as collateral for his gambling debts, thinking it would be Jennifer's soon. The property tax situation was dire. They were 3 months behind accumulating penalties daily. They had ignored every notice, probably throwing them away without reading them, assuming someone else would handle it. I paid it all in full, adding another piece of evidence to my ownership claim. I prepared everything meticulously. Each family member would receive their own folder with personalized eviction papers, copies of their illegal activities, and a cease and desist order preventing them from contesting the will. I also prepared a special surprise, a copy of every cruel text message, email, and social media post they had made about me over the past 6 months. They would see in their own words why they were losing everything. On December 23rd, I went to my apartment and baked. I made tiramisu using Grandpa's secret recipe, the one he had taught me when I was 15. It had been his mother's recipe from Italy, passed down through generations. The only person he had ever shared it with was me, during one of those long afternoons when we were the only ones in the kitchen, the only ones who cared about preserving family traditions. As I layered the ladyfingers soaked in espresso, spreading the mascarpone mixture infused with just the right amount of rum, I thought about all those Christmas Eves with Grandpa. He always insisted on making dessert himself, even when his hands shook with age. "It's about love, Debbie," he would say. "Food made with love tastes different. People know when you care." I made 3 large pans of tiramisu, enough for the 30 guests they expected. Each layer was perfect, each dusting of cocoa precise. This would be my swan song, my final act of service to people who had never appreciated anything I had done. But this time, it would mean something different. I also prepared my appearance carefully. They expected me to show up in my usual thrift store finds, looking tired and defeated. Instead, I wore an elegant black dress I had bought with my own money. Simple but expensive, the kind of quality that speaks for itself. I had my hair professionally styled and my makeup done at a salon. I looked like the successful woman I was about to become, not the failure they had always seen. The morning of Christmas Eve, I confirmed everything with Mr. Harrison one last time. He would arrive at exactly 9 p.m. after dinner, but during dessert. The moving trucks were scheduled for December 26th at 7 a.m. sharp. The locksmith would come at noon to change every lock. My new condo across the city was ready and waiting, a fresh start far from their toxicity. I loaded the tiramisu into my car, along with the folders that would change everything. I also brought a small suitcase with things I wanted to retrieve from the house: photos of Grandpa and me, his war medals that Jennifer had hidden in a closet to sell later, and the recipe box that had belonged to my grandmother. These were the only things in that house that truly mattered to me. The drive to the house felt both eternal and too quick. 6 months of waiting, watching, and documenting were about to culminate in this moment. I thought about Grandpa, hoping he would be proud of how I had handled everything. I had shown patience when I wanted to scream grace, when they showed cruelty, and silence when I wanted to expose them all. As I pulled into the driveway of what was legally my house, I saw the cars already lining the street. The party had started early. Through the windows, I could see the Christmas tree twinkling, the guests mingling with champagne glasses, and my family playing the role of successful inheritors. None of them knew that in just a few hours their entire charade would come crashing down. I sat in my car for a moment, taking deep breaths. This wasn't about revenge, I reminded myself. This was about justice. This was about honoring Grandpa's wishes and finally standing up for myself. This was about showing them that the quiet one, the disappointment, the one they had laughed at and dismissed, was actually the one who had won everything. I rang the doorbell at 6:30 p.m., holding the first of 3 tiramisu pans. Linda opened the door, her face immediately shifting from a fake smile to disappointment when she saw it was just me. "Oh, you actually came?" she said, looking me up and down. Her eyes narrowed at my dress. "Where did you rent that from?" "I borrowed it from a friend." I lied smoothly, stepping inside my own house like a servant. The place was packed with their guests, mostly people I recognized as social climbers and opportunists, just like my family. The Christmas decorations were gaudy and over the top, nothing like the simple elegance Grandpa had always preferred. Jennifer appeared from the kitchen wearing a red cocktail dress that cost more than most people's rent. Her eyes went wide when she saw me. "Well, well, look who cleaned up." Trying to impress someone, Debra. "Too bad everyone here knows exactly what you are." She turned to her friend Madison and stage whispered, "My sister, the eternal waitress." Some people just peak in high school, you know. The friends laughed politely, though some looked uncomfortable. I simply smiled and asked where she wanted me to put the dessert. Jennifer waved dismissively toward the kitchen. "Just put it somewhere. We have a professional dessert from the French bakery, so we probably won't even need yours. And grab an apron while you're in there. Mom wants you to help serve dinner." In the kitchen, I found chaos. The caterers they had hired were overwhelmed trying to serve 30 people with equipment meant for 15. They had skimped on the service to save money, assuming I would pick up the slack for free. I put on the apron, not because they told me to, but because it would make the reveal even sweeter. For the next 2 hours, I served my family and their guests in my own house. I carried plates of expensive food they couldn't actually afford, poured wine they had charged to maxed out credit cards, and smiled as they told embarrassing stories about me to entertain their guests. Linda regaled the table with the story of how I had wanted to go to culinary school, but couldn't even get a loan. Jennifer shared how I had been dumped by my college boyfriend for someone more ambitious. Kevin, already drunk, told everyone about the time I had cried at Grandpa's funeral, saying I was always too emotional, too weak. Brad was the worst, going on and on about his plans for the house. "We're going to knock down the back wall, put in a pool," he slurred. "Maybe rent out the basement as an apartment. This place is a gold mine just waiting to be exploited." He raised his glass to Linda. "Thanks for letting us stay here, Linda. Family takes care of family, right?" Not everyone was cruel. Some of the guests looked uncomfortable with how I was being treated. Mrs. Patterson, Linda's book club friend, even tried to include me in conversation, asking about my work at the restaurant. Before I could answer, Jennifer cut in. "Oh, she just serves pasta to tourists. Nothing interesting. Hey, Debra, we need more bread on table 3. At 8:45, it was time for dessert. The French bakery desserts had mysteriously never arrived, probably because the credit card Linda had used was declined. She was frantically calling them, demanding to speak to managers, threatening lawsuits. Jennifer turned to me with fury in her eyes. "Well, I guess we'll have to use your little homemade thing. Try not to embarrass us more than you already have." I brought out all 3 pans of tiramisu, beautifully presented on Grandma's silver platters I had found shoved in a closet. The dessert looked perfect, professional, even with its delicate layers visible through the glass sides of the pan. The cocoa powder dusted in an elegant pattern on top. Several guests made appreciative noises, commenting on how beautiful it looked. "Your sister made this?" Mrs. Patterson asked Jennifer. "This looks like it came from a high-end restaurant." Jennifer's face turned red. She picked up a serving spoon and deliberately knocked the first pan off the counter. It crashed to the floor, tiramisu splattering across the Italian tiles Grandpa had installed himself. "Oops," she said with a smirk. "How clumsy of me. Guess you'll have to clean that up, Debra. It's good practice for your real job." The room erupted in laughter, the cruel kind that comes from people who build themselves up by tearing others down. I got on my knees supposedly to clean, but really to compose myself for what was coming. I could hear them above me, Linda saying, "At least she's consistent at failing," and Brad adding, "Some people are just born to serve others. It's not a bad thing, just reality." As I stood up, dustpan in hand, I saw Mr. Harrison's car pull into the driveway. It was exactly 9 p.m. I walked to the trash can, dumped the ruined dessert, and then did something they didn't expect. I took off the apron, folded it neatly, and picked up Kevin's karaoke microphone from the corner where he had left it after his drunken performance earlier. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, my voice calm and clear. "I have an announcement about this house." The room fell silent as I stood there, microphone in hand, no longer the submissive servant they expected me to be. Jennifer recovered first, laughing loudly. "Oh, this should be good. What did you finally save up enough to rent a room? Maybe we'll let you have the closet under the stairs, like Harry Potter." The guests laughed nervously, but I remained calm, making eye contact with each family member. "Actually, Jennifer," I said clearly, "I own this house. Every brick, every tile, every single thing you've destroyed over the past 6 months." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, like a dam bursting, they all started laughing even harder than before. Linda actually had tears in her eyes from laughing so hard. "The delusion," she gasped. "Did you hit your head while you were cleaning? Someone get her a glass of water. She's clearly having some kind of breakdown." Kevin stumbled forward, still drunk. "Debra, this is embarrassing even for you. We all know Grandpa left the house to Mom. Stop trying to get attention." I reached into my bag and pulled out the folders, setting them on the coffee table with a satisfying thud. "Actually, Kevin Grandpa left the house to me 6 months ago. Which means every single day you've been living here, destroying his memory, selling his belongings. You've been trespassing on my property." The laughter stopped. Jennifer snatched one of the folders, her face paling as she read through the documents. "This is fake," she whispered, then louder. "This is fake. You forged these. We'll sue you for fraud. Right on cue." Mr. Harrison walked through the door. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Robert Harrison, Walter's attorney. I can confirm that everything Ms. Debra is saying is completely accurate. She has been the legal owner of this property since the day Walter passed away." The room erupted into chaos. Linda started screaming that it was impossible that she would contest the will. Brad was on his phone frantically calling someone, probably his bookie. Kevin had sobered up instantly, his face white, as he realized the implications for his illegal business operations. Mr. Harrison continued calmly. "As the legal owner, Ms. Debra has asked me to inform you that you have 72 hours to vacate the premises starting at midnight tonight. The eviction notices are all in order, filed with the county court this morning." Jennifer turned on me, her face twisted with rage. "You've been planning this. You let us live here, let us think it was ours, all while knowing that's entrapment, that's illegal." "Actually," I said, finding my voice growing stronger, "it was Grandpa's last wish. He wanted me to see who you really were when you thought no one was watching. And you showed me. You showed me when you sold his Purple Heart Jennifer. You showed me when you destroyed his workshop Kevin. You showed me when you threw away every photo of him with me, Mom, because you didn't want reminders that he loved someone else more." The guests were starting to leave quietly, gathering their coats and slipping out the door. Some whispered apologies to me. Others just looked shocked. Mrs. Patterson stopped beside me and pressed my hand. "Good for you, dear. Your grandfather would be so proud." Brad finally got through to whoever he was calling and started yelling about needing more time, that the house was his collateral. Mr. Harrison stepped forward. "Mr. Brad, I should inform you that using property you don't own as collateral for gambling debts is fraud. The police have been notified." Linda found her voice switching tactics from rage to manipulation. "Debra, sweetheart, we're family. Family forgives. We didn't know you were struggling so much. We can work this out. You can't throw your own mother out on the street at Christmas." I almost laughed at the audacity. "Family, is that what you call it when you didn't invite me to Thanksgiving? When you posted on Facebook that your family was complete without the disappointment? When you made me serve your guests in my own house while you told them embarrassing lies about me?" Kevin tried next, attempting brotherly affection for the first time in years. "Debbie, come on, we were just joking around. You know we love you." "We're blood. That has to count for something. Blood." I responded, my voice steady. Blood didn't mean anything when I was the only one taking care of Grandpa. Blood didn't mean anything when he was dying, and none of you could be bothered to visit. Blood didn't mean anything when you were planning to sell his house to the highest bidder before his body was even cold. Jennifer made one last desperate attempt. What about the money Grandpa had money saved? That should be split between all of us. You can't keep that too, Mr. Harrison answered for me. Walter's entire estate was left to Debra. The house, the savings, everything. He was very specific in his will. He also left letters explaining why, if any of you would like to read them. He pulled out 3 envelopes, one for each of them. Linda tore hers open immediately, reading aloud in a shaking voice. Linda, you were my daughter by birth, but not by choice. You showed your true character when you refused to help with my medical bills, but asked about my life insurance every visit. I leave you nothing because that's what you gave me, nothing but disappointment. Jennifer read hers silently, tears starting to stream down her face. Kevin didn't even open his, just crumpled it in his fist. The reality was setting in. They had lost everything they thought was theirs. You planned this, Linda said, her voice venomous. You manipulated a sick old man. You turned him against his real family. You're nothing but a gold digger who took advantage of a dying man's loneliness. I felt the old me wanting to shrink to apologize to make peace. But then I remembered every cruel word, every dismissive laugh, every time they had made me feel worthless. No, Mom. I loved him. I was there every single day of his illness, holding his hand, reading to him, making sure he wasn't alone. Where were you? At your book club? At Jennifer's parties, anywhere but with your dying father. The room was almost empty now, just family and Mr. Harrison remaining. I picked up the microphone one more time. You have 72 hours. The moving trucks will arrive December 26th at 7 a.m. Take only what belongs to you, and I have an inventory of everything that was in this house when Grandpa died. If anything is missing, I will press charges. But it's Christmas, Jennifer wailed. Where are we supposed to go? I looked at her coldly. That's not my problem. Maybe Brad's bookie will give you a place to stay, or Kevin's business partners. Or Mom can call one of her book club friends. You know, all those people who just watched you humiliate me and did nothing. As I headed for the door, Linda called out one more time. You'll regret this, Debra. When you're all alone in this house, no family, no one who really knows you, you'll realize what you've thrown away. We're your blood. Without us, you're nothing. I turned back one last time. No, Mom. Without you, I'm finally free. Grandpa knew that. He knew that the greatest gift he could give me wasn't just this house or the money. It was freedom from the obligation to love people who never loved me back. And do you want to know the really sad part? If just one of you, even once in the last 6 months, had shown me genuine kindness, genuine love, I might have shared it all with you. But you couldn't even fake it for 6 months. I walked out of my own house, then leaving them to process their new reality. Mr. Harrison would stay to supervise and make sure they didn't destroy anything in their rage. I had a reservation at a nice hotel downtown, a place to stay until they were gone. As I drove away, I saw neighbors already gathering on their lawns, having heard the commotion. By tomorrow, everyone would know. The family that had bragged about their inheritance would be exposed as frauds and squatters. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty, tired, and surprisingly sad. Not for them, but for the family we could have been if they had been different people. For the Christmases that could have been filled with real love instead of performance and cruelty. For the relationship with my mother that never was and never would be. That night in the hotel, I found one more letter from Grandpa, one Mr. Harrison had been instructed to give me after everything was over. My dearest Debbie, it read, by now you've done what needed to be done. I know it wasn't easy. I know they will have hurt you one more time before it was over. But you needed to see them clearly without the fog of hope that they might change. They won't. They can't. Some people are so broken by their own greed and insecurity that they can't see the treasure right in front of them. You were that treasure and they threw you away. Now you're free. Build a life filled with people who see your worth. You deserve nothing less. All my love. Grandpa. December 26th arrived with a bitter wind and heavy snow. I sat in my rental car across the street from the house at 6:45 a.m., watching as the moving trucks pulled up precisely at 7. Mr. Harrison was already there along with 2 police officers he had requested to keep the peace. My family had not left yet, hoping until the last moment that this was all some elaborate prank or that I would change my mind. Linda came out first, dragging suitcases, her face swollen from crying, or rage, or both. She saw me watching and walked over to my car, knocking on the window. I rolled it down an inch, just enough to hear her. "I hope you're happy," she spat. "You've destroyed this family. Your grandfather would be ashamed of what you've become." I said nothing, just rolled the window back up. There was nothing left to say. She had made her choices over a lifetime, and these were the consequences. She stood there for another moment, perhaps waiting for me to break, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness. When I didn't, she walked away, her shoulders shaking with either cold or emotion. Jennifer and Brad came out next, Brad carrying boxes while Jennifer supervised. She was on her phone loudly talking to someone about illegal eviction and elder abuse, throwing around legal terms she didn't understand. When she saw me, she ended the call and marched over. "We're going to sue you for everything," she announced. "Emotional distress, illegal eviction fraud. You'll lose everything, and we'll be back in that house by New Year's." Mr. Harrison, who had walked over, responded calmly. "Ms. Jennifer, you're welcome to try. However, I should remind you that we have documentation of your credit card fraud, your husband's attempt to use the house as gambling collateral, and your theft of various items from the estate. I would think very carefully before pursuing legal action." Brad pulled Jennifer away, whispering urgently in her ear. I found out later that his creditors were already circling, having learned that the house he had promised them was never his to offer. They would spend the next months running from debt collectors and eventually file for bankruptcy. Kevin was the last to leave and the most pathetic. He had spent the night trying to move his illegal supplement inventory, but the FDA had been tipped off by an anonymous source, me, and they were waiting for him. They confiscated everything, and he was looking at serious federal charges. As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked at me through the car window, and for just a moment, I saw something that might have been regret. Or maybe it was just fear. Either way, it was too late. By noon, the house was empty of their presence. The locksmith had changed every lock, and I finally entered my home as its acknowledged owner. The damage was worse than I had imagined. They had punched holes in walls and their anger-torn curtains, broken dishes. Jennifer had tried to take Grandma's china, but Mr. Harrison had stopped her. Brad had actually pried some fixtures off the walls to take with him. But underneath the surface damage, the bones of the house were strong. Grandpa had built and maintained it well, and it would survive this like it had survived everything else. I walked through each room, making notes of what needed to be fixed, what needed to be replaced, and what could be salvaged. In the basement, I found something that made me cry for the first time that day. Hidden behind Kevin's boxes of pills was a small wooden box I recognized. Inside were all of Grandpa's letters to Grandma during the war, tied with a ribbon. He had shown them to me once, explaining that they were the most precious things he owned because they represented love that lasted. Kevin had probably planned to sell them to a collector. They were worth thousands to the right buyer, but they were priceless to me. I spent the rest of the day cleaning not the surface mess, but the energy of the place. I opened every window despite the cold, letting their negativity blow away with the winter wind. I burned sage in every room, a practice Grandpa had taught me from his time living with Native American friends after the war. I played his favorite jazz records, filling the space with music instead of anger. That evening, Mrs. Thompson from next door knocked. She had brought soup and fresh bread along with a poinsettia for the season. "I've been waiting to do this for months," she said, setting the food on the counter. "Your grandfather told me everything before he died. He made me promise not to interfere, but it killed me watching them disrespect you in your own house." We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Grandpa and I had played countless games of cards, and she told me stories I had never heard. How he had bragged about me to everyone in the neighborhood. How he had shown off every photo I sent him, every article about the restaurant where I worked when they got a good review. How he had known for years that the rest of the family was rotten, but had hoped they would prove him wrong. "He loved you more than anything," she said, patting my hand. "He told me once that you were the only good thing to come from his daughter. That everything wrong with Linda was worth it because it led to you. He was so proud of who you became despite them, not because of them." Over the next weeks, more neighbors stopped by. They all had similar stories about Grandpa's love for me, about their disgust with how my family had behaved, about their relief that justice had been served. Some brought food, others offered to help with repairs. Mr. Chen from down the street, a contractor, gave me a discount on fixing the walls. The Andersons helped me move the furniture back to where Grandpa had kept it. I found out what happened to my family through the neighborhood gossip network. Linda had moved in with her sister in Florida, the one she had always talked badly about. Their relationship lasted exactly 2 weeks before Linda was asked to leave. She now lived in a small apartment working as a receptionist at a dental office, telling everyone who would listen that her daughter had stolen her inheritance. Jennifer and Brad divorced within 3 months. Without the house to leverage and with Brad's gambling debts crushing them, Jennifer had no reason to stay. She moved back to the small town where she went to high school, living with her former best friend and working at the same mall where she had worked as a teenager. The social media posts about her glamorous life stopped completely. Kevin went to federal prison for 18 months. The supplement business that was going to make him rich turned out to be his downfall. After his release, he moved to Texas, where he worked in construction. I heard he was sober now, maybe the only positive outcome from all of this. Meanwhile, I transformed the house. Not into something new, but back to what it had been when Grandpa was alive. I refinished his workshop-donated tools to the local high school's shop class in his name. I turned Jennifer's party room back into the library it had been, filling it with books, including new copies of all the first editions Brad had sold. I restored the kitchen to its original warmth, cooking Grandpa's recipes, and finally using that culinary education they had mocked. The $500,000 Grandpa left me was more than enough to quit my waitressing job and open my own small bakery downtown. I named it Walter's, and our specialty was, of course, tiramisu. The recipe that had been passed down through generations, that had been made with love and served with contempt, was now bringing joy to strangers who appreciated it. The bakery became successful beyond my dreams, not just financially, but as a gathering place for the community. I hired young people who needed chances, remembering how it felt to be dismissed and undervalued. I donated leftover baked goods to the shelter, thinking of all the times I had been hungry while my family feasted in my house. I created a place where everyone was welcome, where no one was made to feel less than. 1 year later, on Christmas Eve, I stood in the same living room where I had been humiliated, but this time it was filled with different people. Mrs. Thompson was there, along with the Chens, the Andersons, and a dozen other neighbors who had become my chosen family. My employees from the bakery came with their families, filling the house with children's laughter for the first time in years. The string quartet that had played for my family's fake party was there too, but this time as guests, not hired help. I had spent the day cooking using all of Grandpa's recipes and some of my own. The dining room table was full of food made with love, served with joy, received with gratitude. No one was asked to wear an apron unless they wanted to help. No one was mocked or diminished. Everyone was welcome exactly as they were. As I brought out the tiramisu, the same recipe but made with entirely different intentions, Mrs. Thompson raised her glass. To Debra, she said, and to Walter, who knew that sometimes the best gift you can give someone is the truth about who deserves their love. Everyone toasted, and I felt Grandpa's presence so strongly, it took my breath away. I could almost hear his voice saying, "This is what family looks like, Debbie. People who choose to love you, who see your worth, who celebrate your success, instead of resenting it." After dinner, as people mingled and laughed, sharing stories and making plans, I stepped out onto the back porch, the same porch where Grandpa had taught me to play chess, where he had told me stories about the war, where he had promised that someday I would understand why he was so hard on the rest of the family. I understood now. He had seen their true nature long before I had, but he knew I needed to see it for myself. I needed to stop hoping they would change, stop believing that if I just tried harder or loved more, they would love me back. He had given me the gift of clarity wrapped in pain, but tied with liberation. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from Jennifer. "Merry Christmas," it said. "I hope you're happy now that you've destroyed our family." I deleted it without responding. There was nothing to say. The family she referenced had destroyed itself through greed, cruelty, and the inability to love anyone who couldn't benefit them. I hadn't destroyed anything. I had simply stopped enabling it. Another text came through, this one from Kevin. It was longer, more thoughtful. Debra, I know you won't respond, but I wanted you to know that prison gave me time to think. I was a terrible brother. We all were terrible to you. Grandpa was right to leave you everything. I'm sorry for who I was. I'm trying to be better. Maybe someday you can forgive me. Maybe not. Either way, Merry Christmas. I stared at that one longer feeling something shift slightly in my chest. Maybe Kevin would change. Maybe he wouldn't. Maybe someday, years from now, we could have coffee and talk about who we had become instead of who we had been. Or maybe not. Either way, it wasn't my responsibility to hold space for maybes anymore. I went back inside to my real family, the one built on respect and genuine affection. Someone had started playing piano, and others were singing Christmas carols off key, but with enthusiasm. Children were playing with toys in the corner where Jennifer used to pose for Instagram photos. The house was alive with real joy, not the performed kind my family had specialized in. As midnight approached, I stood in the kitchen loading the dishwasher, while friends insisted on helping. This was where it had happened, where Jennifer had deliberately destroyed the tiramisu, where my mother had called me a disappointment, where they had laughed at my pain. But those ghosts had no power here anymore. They had been exorcised by love, real love, the kind that builds up instead of tears down. Mr. Harrison stopped by even though I had told him he didn't need to. He handed me one last envelope, something Grandpa had left with instructions to give me after a full year had passed. Inside was a simple note in Grandpa's shaky handwriting. Debbie, if you're reading this, it means you survived them. It means you did what needed to be done. It means you're free. Now stop looking back. Your life is ahead of you, not behind you. Fill that house with love and laughter. Fill your life with people who deserve you. Be happy, my dear girl. That's an order from your old grandpa. P.S. The tiramisu recipe has one secret ingredient I never told you. It's forgiveness. Not for them, but for yourself. For all the years you thought their treatment meant something was wrong with you. There never was. You were perfect all along. I stood there crying, not from sadness, but from release. The last weight I didn't even know I was carrying fell away. I had been so focused on their betrayal that I hadn't fully forgiven myself for believing for so long that I deserved it. But Grandpa was right as always. I had been perfect all along. Not perfect in the sense of without flaws, but perfect in my capacity to love, to endure, to ultimately choose myself. The clock struck midnight, officially making it Christmas Day. Someone started a toast, but I was already walking toward the back door, Grandpa's letter in my hand. I stepped out into the snow, looking up at the stars barely visible through the clouds. Somewhere up there, I believed Grandpa was watching, finally at peace, knowing his plan had worked. Thank you, I whispered to the sky. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. Thank you for loving me when no one else would. Thank you for giving me the strength to stand up for myself. Thank you for the house, the money, but most of all, thank you for the freedom. A warm hand touched my shoulder. It was James, the sous chef from my bakery, who had become more than just an employee over the past months. We had been taking things slow, both of us carrying baggage from past hurts. But he had shown up consistently with small acts of kindness and genuine interest in who I was, beyond my story of family betrayal. You okay? He asked softly. More than okay, I replied, taking his hand. I'm free. We stood there together, watching the snow fall on the garden, where I would plant Grandpa's favorite flowers in the spring. Inside, our chosen family continued celebrating their laughter, carrying through the windows like a promise of all the good things to come. The house that had been a battlefield was now a sanctuary. The inheritance that had revealed the worst in people had brought out the best in others. The girl who had been called a disappointment had become a successful business owner, a generous employer, a cherished friend, and maybe, when she was ready, someone's partner. But most importantly, I had become myself. Not the watered-down version I had presented to try to earn my family's love, not the victim they had tried to make me, not the servant they had assumed I would always be. I was Debra, granddaughter of Walter, owner of Walter's Bakery, owner of this beautiful house, survivor of a toxic family, and thriver in spite of them. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't what you receive, but what you're freed from. Grandpa knew that serving them dessert that Christmas Eve would be my last act of service to people who never deserved it. Now, in his house, I serve love to those who return it. The papers I signed weren't just eviction notices. They were my declaration of independence. And every Christmas Eve from now on, when I make tiramisu using the complete recipe with forgiveness as the secret ingredient, I remember that the sweetest victory isn't revenge. It's happiness without them. To anyone watching who has their own toxic family, who has been made to feel less than who has been told they're a disappointment, let me tell you what Grandpa told me. You're perfect as you are. Their inability to see your worth doesn't diminish it. Sometimes the family you choose is infinitely better than the family you're born into. And sometimes the best thing you can do is sign those papers, change those locks, and never look back. What boundaries have you had to set with family to protect your peace? Have you ever had to choose yourself over toxic relationships? Share your story in the comments below. We're all in this journey together, learning that self-love sometimes means saying goodbye to people who should have loved us better. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of triumph over adversity. Share this with someone who needs to hear that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for being here with me today, and remember you deserve to be surrounded by people who see your worth without you having to prove it. Merry Christmas, and may your new year be filled with the family you choose, not the family you're stuck with.